everybody, my name is Riley Wright, and I did my presentation on human trafficking victims, the environmental and cultural factors. Okay, so the media that portrays human trafficking victims I've either found is inconsistent, sympathetic, or shows awareness to other people. The inconsistency just kind of stays with like some states saying that it can happen to anybody right outside your house, and others say that it can't, and so you shouldn't be worried about it. And you always want to make sure that the news or wherever you're getting it from has correct information, because it can kind of get twisted and then people are getting the wrong information. Media does portray human trafficking as a sad and scary thing, making it so that people are aware and show more sympathy to the cause. This will help the victim population in a good way because people will understand what they've gone through on a certain level. More accreditation will also be given to this population. For awareness, the media has been building the awareness that human trafficking is happening here in the United States, which is a good thing because it warns people to look for signs and be aware of their surroundings. Newspapers, news stations, and TV, and many announcements on social media have been made to spread this awareness. Okay, so the family support and the role of the peers provided to these victims need to be worried mostly about their mental health. These victims need more help recovering from the mental and emotional aspect of the experience. The best thing the family can do to support their loved one that has gone through such a tragic thing is give them the help that they need by finding therapy sessions or psychologists to talk to work out their distorted thoughts, basically. If there's a lack of support from the family, it can be harder for the victim to cope with life and the outcomes of their mentality for the rest of their lives. It's essential to have that support when you return back home. Another thing is being supportive is really huge for these people. Victims will have PTSD after going through what they did and need people that will understand and make them feel safe. As far as cyclic nature of human trafficked victims, I didn't really find anything like if it gets passed on to generations, but I know from a article that I read, it talked about victims that end up back in the same home and environment are found to be more at risk for reoccurring the incidents and being found again and taken. So that is probably the only cyclic nature of human trafficked victims. Okay, so aligning efforts, improving understanding, expand access to services, and improving outcomes. These 4 points are the target goals for multiple organizations that are with the government. The ACF, which is an office of the Administration for Children and Families, bring out what the government is doing for human trafficking that is occurring here in the United States. The government has a goal to decrease the numbers in the population that is being human trafficked and looks at it at a national and global standpoint. Each of these 4 points include services that will help victims spread awareness and hoping that the outcomes will soon improve. The potential barriers are low income, bad community, lower education, drug and alcohol abuse shown in the community or in the intermediate family home. These are all potential barriers that might put someone more at risk to be trafficked. Lower income households tend to live in communities where there are people who are bad influences and into bad stuff like alcohol and drug abuse. These can put you more at risk and vulnerable to be taken into the human trafficking industry. These communities might have a lot of parents who don't look after their children closely, which also makes it easier for suspects to gain power of that child and take them. Okay, so on a national level, it has shown that Russia and China are in the third tier group for human trafficking and has shown that they are the 2 biggest countries that have the most human trafficking going on. Within the United States, California as the #1 state has the most incidents. This should be made aware to those who live in California because the population that they are in are more at risk to be recruited into it. So socioeconomic status, health disparities are anxiety, depression, PTSD, and STDs. The victims of this population is affected most from mental illness factors and sexually transmitted disease. These people who have been affected by human trafficking will most likely always live in a life of fear. The events of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse will follow them into PTSD episodes and will most likely need therapy to have better outcome for their health. Sexually transmitted diseases that can't be cured with antibiotics like HIV will follow them for the rest of their lives. Okay, so staying away from certain areas in the home, ones with more risk of being trafficked especially, can help prevent you from being affected by human trafficking. There are countries out there and believe in forcing children to work and forcing marriages that aren't wanted, which it could be recommended to leave that country if you feel like this could resubmit you into that tragedy. Okay, so during investigations, when there are calls about domestic abuse or any type of abuse, a police officer that shows up at this home might disregard things and have either a implicit or explicit bias towards the situation. Shows that like being male gives you an advantage of having the power and control of making situations less bad, and police officers should be trained to not go with their biased opinions even though they might want to. If they don't properly report the situations, because they might think that it's not a problem, human traffickers will get away with these issues and the victims will be at risk for staying in the situation and never being saved. Okay, the countries that have lack of healthcare supplies and personnel might have less of an influence on correcting health issues for victims coming out of a human trafficking situation. The disparities mentioned on previous slides, like the socioeconomic status, for sure will have a lack of health influence to get what certain people need, like therapy for their acquired mental illnesses. Okay, so for race and ethnicity, religion, and gender, I found it really hard to find a lot of health disparities with human trafficking, so I think they're just not applicable or uncommon. But the only factors that would be seen with this population are people who have the ability to control others. There's not really like male versus female roles that like put you more at risk for being trafficked, and same thing goes for religions and race. Okay, and this is my reference page. Thank you for listening and looking at my presentation. Appreciate it.